The world of Trigun is a bleak, dark place, often depicting humanity at its very worst. Perhaps that's why even a clearly sociopathic monster like Millions Knives begins to make a bit of sense by the time we get to the end. Even though we're talking about a man hell-bent on total human annihilation, it's still difficult to say that he doesn't have some shades of gray to his character. Thus, to truly understand the motivations behind Millions Knives' heinous crimes, we'll be diving deep into his origins and anatomy with this marvelous video. Who is Millions Knives in Trigun? Though Knives' story plays out a bit differently between the manga and anime adaptations, one thing is for certain. It is his actions that lead to almost every major incident in the Trigun saga. Most of us remember the character as one of the cruelest villains ever portrayed on screen, but we need to remember that Knives wasn't always like contrary. He's actually way more similar to the series' protagonist, Vash, than might have imagined. Knives and Vash are actually twin brothers, born together aboard the Seeds Ship 5. Mistake this for a normal human birth, as both kids are actually beyond us mere mortals. Turns out that the Seeds Ship 5 was one of the spaceships tasked with finding a new home planet for humans and living power generators, plants. In Trigun, plants is the name assigned to the interdimensional being tapped by humans in order to act as their primary power sources. These extremely powerful entities are capable of generating everything from power to food to water based on the environments they're placed in. These entities were invented by humans, and most of them are basically immobile objects that need specialized environments to survive. Due to this, they're usually kept in bulb-like containers where the conditions can be carefully managed. But what does that have to do with the miraculous twins born on Seed Ship 5? Well, surprisingly, Knives and Vash are literally plants themselves. Two boys are very rare examples of independent plants, which means they can survive outside the specially manufactured environments necessary for the survival of the rest of their kind. Moreover, the boys also look and behave like humans, makes them a strange amalgamation of technology and organic matter. Despite the strange circumstances of the twins' birth, the navigational officer on board the Seeds Ship 5 adopted the two boys. From the very beginning, the twins started exhibiting some very peculiar physical characteristics. By the time the boys celebrated their first birthday, they already seemed to be around age 7 or 8. In addition to this, the boys even began to exhibit some of the basic generative abilities associated with plants. These traits were much more dominant in Knives, who soon stopped feeling the need for human nourishment. During this period, Vash appeared to be more or less powerless, but developed a like humanity in its ways. Despite his inhuman traits, Knives still seemed to possess a keen intelligence and even exhibited normal childlike behavior in other scenarios. However, he also grew more melancholic as he aged and began showing discomfort at Rem's futile attempts at concealing his powers. Over time, Vash grew more and more human, which ended up alienating him to a large extent. We're about to get much worse. One day, when investigating an area of the ship forbidden, twins discovered a classified data consisting entirety of the Seeds fleet's history. The twins entered the databank out of childhood curiosity. Contents of the drive would end up changing their lives forever. The kids figured out that they weren't really the first independent plants to be born on the ship. There had been another by the name of Tesla, discovered some 50 years prior to their birth. The ship's crew found her and then tore her body to bits to understand the source of her boundless powers. The most disturbing fact, however, was that Tesla was still alive in suspended animation. This meant that the young girl had spent almost 50 years in a vivisected and dismembered state, undergoing torturous experiments at the hands of the humans. The twins would eventually discover the tanks where Tesla's remains were being held, providing clear evidence of their worst fears. While their adoptive mother, Rem, tried her best to calm them down by confessing that she had adopted them to ensure they wouldn't ever be treated like Tesla, damage was done. The incident instilled a fear within the twins regarding whether they'd ever really be accepted by humans. Vash was somehow able to hold on to his faith in humanity. Knives slowly began to drift away. Knives saw Vash's affinity towards the humans. The young boy knew a decision had to be made. Seeing his brother as a naive weakling who needed to be protected from humans, Knives came up with a twisted plot. By secretly accessing the Seeds navigation system, he caused every single ship in the fleet to crash land on the desert planet No Man's Land, or Gunsmoke. At the very last moment, Rem takes the two twins to an escape pod, but despite Knives' pleas, refuses to enter it herself. Instead, she chooses to stay behind in order to help her comrades. The ships would crash into the planet with the wreckage from the fleet scattered all across the planet's arid surface. A confused Vash finally made his way to his brother, just found the boy sitting there in the middle of the wreckage, laughing his heart out. Though Vash tried to confront his brother regarding the mass murder he'd just committed, Knives simply stated that Vash had been an accomplice all along, as it was he provided Knives with the password systems. Following the crash, Vash and Knives traveled across the planet for about 80 years. Fortunately, one day Vash would be abducted for a while by a man in a small town. This would lead to Knives completely losing and wiping out the entirety of the town's population in retaliation. In Knives' eyes, this was the justified consequence of their actions. However, Vash was left utterly horrified by his brother's actions. Upon being confronted, Knives revealed for the first time his plans for the complete eradication of the humans. Needless to say, this didn't sit well with Vash. He shot his brother to stop. Knives, who was much more in control of his powers at this point in the story, countered by slicing off Vash's arm. Knives then took off on his own to fulfill his terrifying goal. During his travels, Knives would find his way to a small slave town consisting of some 1,301 people. Disgusted by the conditions there, he would end up killing every single person in this place except a young slave boy, Legato. Upon witnessing Legato's telekinetic abilities and genuine desire to be his servant, Knives would take him on as a second in command. It was during this time that he recruited other members of his team, plant researcher Conrad, future Gung Ho Guns member Elen Dira. Many decades later, Vash and Knives would finally meet each other again in the desolate little town known as July. As expected, a fight between the two breaks out, during which Knives ends up activating Vash's angel arm by control of his twin brother. But at the very last second, Vash manages to gain control of his newly awakened power and directs the shot at Knives. The impact leaves Knives at the brink of death and destroys the entire city of July in the blink of an eye. Fortunately, Legato had been trailing his master from the shadows and rescued Knives from certain death. Knives is then placed inside a plant for 20 years in order to recoup. Meanwhile, the Gung Ho Guns are left behind to take care of things in their master's absence. After healing, Knives happens to visit a town whose plant happens to be dying. Here, he gets a chance to witness the plant in the last stages of its life. He watches as the townspeople struggle to send the plant through one last cycle to extract any remaining resources from its dying body. Eventually, the whole thing just turns black and dies. He also learned that, just like a plant, Knives' power is finite, his death inevitable once it's all exhausted. A black strand of his golden hair proves that Conrad's research is a guy is just killed off in exchange for all his hard work. I guess working for a genocidal psychopath really worth it. What the pay? Jokes aside, Knives gets considerably worse after coming face to face with his own mortality. He begins absorbing other plants in order to rid Gunsmoke of all power generators, which would eventually lead the humans to kill each other over resources. As Knives' schemes get more and more insane, it becomes certain Vash would have to fight each other to the bitter end. What makes Knives' appearance so striking? Knives is the kind of guy that you can see approaching from a mile away. Almost identical to his brother Vash, there are still some features you can use to tell them apart. For instance, he has a beauty mark on the right side of his face, while Vash's is on the left. Though both brothers have blonde hair, Knives' is depicted as a shade darker in the anime. For the course of the series, Knives' hair keeps gaining more blackness as he uses his powers, eventually becoming completely dark. Just like his brother, Knives is a tall and lank individual, easily towels in the ship. Despite his violent inclination, Knives can often be seen sporting an easy smile to put enemies off guard. Rest assured that underneath that pleasant exterior is a man who's already planned your murder. Is Knives simply a heartless villain? In Knives' actions, it's easy to see him as a ruthless villain without even a shred of humanity inside of him. As we've already stated, this genocidal maniac is actually a complex guy. And as a child, Knives was way more sensitive and naive than his brother, expressing curiosity regarding it. He'd eventually grow up to be one of the coldest anime villains ever. Knives is pretty attached to his brother. His experiences with humans and the discovery of independent plant Tesla, a deep scar on the boy's psyche. As he grew up, he began to see the worst traits in humans: their cruelty, their lack of self-control. This led the young plant to see all of humanity as an evil force that left sorrow and suffering along its trail. In fact, Knives' hatred for humans becomes pretty evident after a certain point in his relationship with his adoptive mother, Rem. After Rem's passing in the crash, Knives' sociopathic tendencies become way more dominant. To a ruthless and commanding leader, one object: eradication of all mankind. Though it might appear that Knives possesses no empathy, he's actually extremely sensitive about his fellow plants and seeks to liberate his entire species from humanity. Still, the man Knives feels the most is his brother Vash, whom he sees as a misguided weakling exploited by humans. Though it's undeniable that Knives possesses a heart, he might still be one of the most twisted and vile anime antagonists, which just makes us all the more excited every time he appears on screen. How did Knives' tragic past lead to his hatred for humanity? Knives is undoubtedly one of the most despicable characters we've ever seen, but lying if we told you that his hatred for humanity was motivated. Knives' deep-seated resentment for humanity comes from a series of experiences that he underwent as a child. First, a discovery of Tesla. This was the first time Knives found himself face-to-face with the true extent of human cruelty. Tesla's abuse became one of the key factors behind Knives' decision to crash the fleet and even planted the seeds of his future genocidal plan. The psychological trauma resulting from Tesla's discovery was so deep that Knives began inflicting pain on himself every time he was left. It was also here that he began to see his brother as a knight who was being exploited by the scheming humans. In the anime, Knives' distrust of humans is worsened by his encounters with a new crew member named Steve. Begins abuse. Though Knives was able to withstand the abuse in silence, he eventually broke down when he realized that Steve was beginning to abuse Vash too. As Knives once stated, the way to save the butterfly from the spider is to kill the spider, as there's no way that both could survive. This is the philosophy that Knives would live his life by, ever seeing humanity as the spider preying on his plant brethren. Why does Knives want Vash on his side? In almost every adaptation and version of the Trigun series, Vash is the only individual that Knives truly loves. He sees his brother as a misguided soul who just needs to be brought back to the right path. In the manga, Knives is considerably saddened upon discovering Vash's scars, which solidifies his stand on humanity's eradication. Though he has complete faith in his own philosophy, Knives often expresses genuine interest in his brother's ideology, is often confused as to why his brother would risk his life to protect the despicable humans. Why is Knives okay with Vash being hunted? Well, if Knives is seriously so fond of his brother, then why does he spend most of the series trying to get him? Knives' reasoning here is actually pretty simple. The plant believes that humans are actually powerful enough to kill his brother. Sending different assassins after Vash is actually Knives' twisted way of winning him over. Wants Vash to confront the reality of humans being monsters. Moreover, pushing Vash to the brink of death is also Knives' way of triggering his survival instinct, eventually let his angel powers manifest in an act of self-preservation. What are the powers that make him a threat to humanity? Though Vash and Knives have almost identical skill sets, Knives is still way more powerful for most of the story as he truly understands his origins and powers. This allows him to tap into his power voluntarily in order to create devastating weapons like the Angel. In the anime, these arms are triggered by catalysts hidden in the brothers' handguns. In the manga, the arm is depicted as the natural ability of a plant. Whatever the reason, Angel arms are basically miniature versions of the offensive weapon, allowing Knives to wipe out entire towns in the blink of an eye. In addition to this, Knives is also a powerful telepath ready to control other plants through the shared consciousness brethren share. In later parts of the saga, when Knives has managed to absorb a bunch of other plants into his left arm, his power is increased to an unimaginable extent. The plant bodies he absorbed protrude from his arm like grotesque tumors that seem to cause him considerable discomfort. Knives' power also manifests itself as an array of nanomolecular wire or sharp blades, each one of which is completely under his control. This allows Knives to deal large-scale damage in mere seconds, no way to evade his deadly blades. Knives clearly has a bunch of advantages over his brother. It has to be stated that his gate, the source of his power, is actually less potent than Vash, reason behind his ultimate defeat. How does Knives use his intelligence and powers to control others? For all of Knives' blades and laser cannons, his most useful power is still his intelligence and ability to psychologically manipulate people. Telepathy not only allows him to control plants to the point that they self-combust, also lead humans in dark situations. In the anime, Knives uses his power to kill off humans aboard a ship by causing apparent insanity. It's scary, we don't know what is. Marvelous verdict! Well, Knives is certainly an and detestable individual. Probably still sympathize with his views on the savagery. Yeah, total human eradication is maybe going a step too far, but the man has his reasons. Perhaps that's why we remember Knives even after all these years. But what do you think? Do you find Knives' motivations justified or not? Does this character just hit different in 2024? Please let us know in the comments section down below.